So we'll gauge our conversations that way. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Frank Black. I have the good pleasure of working for HTC and responsible for our enterprise business. So I get to work with some of the really great customers that are doing design innovation and use cases of POC development. And I kind of sit in the catbird seat and I see a lot of great projects. And I'm pleased to say that this panel represents some of the best users of XR that I've seen in the industry. And so I'm very excited to get started. And with that, I will just start to my right with Levi and ask you to introduce yourself and give that one key takeaway. And we'll just go right down the panel and then we'll open it up.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming and sitting in on this one. I'll echo what Frank said. Super excited about this panel. We've all had a chance to chat a few times over the last couple of weeks and just kind of ping pong back and forth. And I think we've got a lot of good material. So if we don't get to everything, I think we would all be happy to keep the conversation going beyond this. So my name is Levi Bilbrey. I manage the creative services team for Bell, which formerly known as Bell Helicopter. We're located here in Fort Worth. Really key takeaway that I want to get into, and like Frank said, we could talk for days about this, but what I noticed a lot over the last several years, we've gotten into XR and we're touching everything across platforms, and it's everything from design to engineering to facilities to IT and HR. Almost every department in the company now is using XR in some way or another. That goes back to 3 or 4 years ago when we introduced it just as one platform, actually using HTC Vive. And we've had a lot of luck with that, but what we started seeing is that people were coming to us to say, can I borrow your tech, or I have an idea, or I have a question, because they had started on their own and started doing a lot of this XR stuff in their own departments. So the key takeaway really, and we could talk more about it in a little bit, is look for those opportunities for cross-collaboration. You've either got tech you can share, you got best practices you can share, and that's really what we're all doing here at this conference, is sharing who's doing what and what's the newest tech and the latest way you can incorporate that tech into whatever area of any business you're in.
Hello, my name is Eric Bursch. I'm a senior manager at Toyota in the R&D area, and I'm responsible for design innovation. So one of my responsibilities is XR deployment and innovating those opportunities to reduce our cost, lead time, anything what we can do to become more efficient using these tools. I think if I were to have one key takeaway or to share with you guys, what Levi said is great. Another thing is, whenever you are doing a pilot and a proof of concept, I feel like you want to think about, you want to take a step back and think about, how can I make this work on a larger scale before you delve down too deep in the details and end up with a solution that only can solve a problem like for a few people. And then also thinking about how you can deploy it across the company.
Hi, I'm Drew Holbrook. I'm with Gulfstream Aerospace. My title is actually very long, but we just shortened it recently to be just Advanced Technologies. We focus on a lot of research and development in the field of disruptive technology. So for the past couple of years, that has been focused on virtual and augmented reality. We're looking to push into other areas as well. So we do a lot of POCs, a lot of testing, a lot of initial development, and then we have other teams that we work with, and we kind of do the approach of teach them how to fish. So we'll set them up with as much information as they can and try to get other users in the company to pick up on it and use it once we make sure we've gotten the security around it and some of the infrastructure, which is always a struggle in this area. My one takeaway is you're in an innovative and disruptive field, so you'll have to do a lot of pushing on different groups, especially in IT and other areas, and you have to be willing to take risk to get it to be successful, especially for the ones starting out. It's sometimes not intuitive, but you just kind of got to keep pushing on it.
Hi, I'm Megan Lubaszka, and I'm with Gensler. We're the world's largest architecture firm, and I'm a creative media leader there, which means that I push visualization across our different platforms, from animation to AR and VR. And my takeaway would be they're both kind of in the same line, but for the people that have been doing this and for the people that are new, I'm really into democratizing this. So if you're new to it, remember, if you can charge your phone, you can plug in a headset. If you can print something, you can bring a model into virtual reality. And if you've been doing this, beware the guru status, empower your teams, because the more people that are using this stuff, the easier it's going to get for all of us, and a rising tide sort of lifts all boats.
I guess I'm the last one here. So my name's Andy Warren. I'm the manager of engineering services support for Bridgestone Corporation. We support all the manufacturing locations globally, so tires, rubber roofing products, and air springs, things like that. My group, we help engineers make their lives easier. So CAD software, new technologies. So innovation falls under my group. And I think the key takeaway, you guys hear the think big, start small, scale fast. But you need to kind of set expectations with that. People have a tendency to want to see something completely finished or a completely polished product out of a POC. And they're like, no, we're just trying to get this one problem solved, and then imagine what we can do with it. So I think you have to get people to get over that fact, because people are excited about it, but a lot of times they want to get in there and see this completely polished product. And if it's your first one out of the gate, or even if it's your 20th one and it's a POC, obviously it's not going to be perfect every time, and set that expectation early and let them know that it's going to get better over time. It's a living, breathing thing that it's going to grow as it goes. It'll get better with time, and don't freak out. It's not the end of the world if it crashes the first time you use it, kind of thing.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much. I wanted to start with you, Megan, if you don't mind. You've got a unique perspective, really coming from design review from an architectural perspective, and really from the creative side of it, and dealing with what I would consider to be high-risk presentations, where you're dealing with, multi-billion-dollar projects with creative intent, trying to be judged by an immersive experience in that, is it really going to look like that kind of thing? How do you build consensus within your organization between the creatives and the engineers and all the key stakeholders and the customer?
That's a great question. Thank you. So we do just for context, we do 7,000 projects a year. And almost all of the Fortune 500 companies are our clients. So we do have these very high profile, alpha types who are in the room with us as we're showing them something that they've spent tons of money on. And they're going to continue to spend tons of money on. So part of that is a really simple thing that people forget about, which is just making that experience kind of pleasurable and not feel weird like you're in the Matrix. So that's one thing I would say. If you're putting someone into VR, try to get them comfortable. Don't ever make someone do it if they don't want to do it. They might feel like they look silly or ridiculous. And then in terms of the actual product, we like to say we're the largest owners of virtual real estate in the world. For every design that we do, we probably have 80 to 200 different versions of it sitting on our servers. So that's kind of a great way for architects to get into this, because you're already building all of these assets, but they're just going to look different over the life cycle of that design phase. So I try to get clients into VR early. We'll start with something like a white model, which will just give them a sense of massing and spatial experience. And then we'll augment that with kind of photorealistic rendering so they can get an idea of where we're headed with it. And then we sort of gradually build up greater detail with each presentation as we get closer to construction.
That's great. I also want to make sure the audience, we will open up for questions. We're going to leave a good 10 minutes, maybe longer, so we can have, you can tap the expertise of this panel. Levi, I wanted to ask you, you guys have been doing some phenomenal work, and we've seen it at the last two CESs. You've been innovating not just on doing design visualization, but actually user input and data capture and AI and all sorts of really innovative ways of, I would say, leveraging an entire ecosystem of a design process and the end user. Maybe you could speak to a little bit about that in terms of how you use design visualization, the end customers, and some of the innovation that you're driving at Bell.
Yeah, sure. And it's actually very, very similar to what Andy was saying about how you kind of start by starting, right? It may be small, it may be kind of simplistic at first. Our very first project into VR was trying to help potential customers, actually the Army in this case, at a trade show, see what it would be like to fly in a future aircraft. We had a full-scale mock-up of this aircraft, but it can only go one place at one time. Very, very expensive to ship around, a lot of logistics and manpower to get that thing working. We put it in VR, and we didn't just say, oh, come sit in the aircraft in VR. We actually built an entire mission from briefing tent at the forward operating base all the way through mission success, and you get to fly in various formats of the aircraft and really, really show it. And we showed that from everybody from enthusiasts all the way to 3- and 4-star generals at that show. That was the one proof point that we needed from our CEO and the entire executive team and everybody at the mothership at the company to say, yes, more of this, so much more of this, because we were able to cover so much more ground and tell so much more of an immersive story of the possibility of these future aircrafts. That actually is really the catalyst that changed so much in my career, and I'm thankful that I can say so much at the company, because we got sort of that backing and those proof points that we needed from different parts of the company, and it just kind of exploded. And it's very similar to the process that Megan was talking about, is just working with so many different types of people, with engineers and creatives, and everybody on my side. We're very right-brained, we're touchy-feely, we want the pretty stuff. So we got to be in charge of aesthetic design of the aircraft. We started partnering with some folks, and we've got some friends here in the audience. Jeff from Sector 5 Digital, if you've not seen what we did at CES this year, we've actually got future flight controls out in the Sector 5 Digital booth. It's fantastic, because that's the piece from the analytics and the data capture. We can actually measure how people respond to different flight control designs. And we put that into a motion seat using HTC Vive. You can pay me later, Jeff. And we're able to really get real-time feedback, and then our engineering team, our innovation teams can take that data back and use it to improve aircraft design, human factors, pilot visibility, all these different types of experiences. So we went from, hey, how do we market our product better, to actually using all these XR products to actually design future aircraft and get real-time feedback. And one other piece to that I really love to tell the story of, we put it in front of a customer advisory board. So these are people who already have our products. They're flying helicopters on a daily basis. It's part of their job, tourism or corporate or whatever. We usually get their feedback on certain new programs, and they may be 6 months to 3 years before they see a design. They're usually sitting there talking about KPIs and metrics and performance. The first time they came to a meeting, we had a full aircraft designed and experienced in VR, and we were able to put them in there and do a human factors and visibility testing and move parts of the aircraft around their preference, and it blew them away. So those are those proof points that we needed early on to say, what if we tried this? And it was really just having that courage to kind of stick your neck out and say, let's just give it a shot and get some feedback and start to incorporate that into our process.
Yeah, and I think the ROI that you guys have been able to identify has been quite significant. We saw a lot of great presentations this morning on ROI. I was blown away at being in this business for quite a while, and then starting to see these just excellent use cases and quantifiable business value being really identified and clearly discussed is very exciting for this business. That being said, it's a big step to go from an innovation, and kind of bleeding edge and leading edge technology to broader deployment. And Eric, you really have a lot of experience in that area. You've cut your teeth on some projects that have worked and some that haven't. And I think your insight would be very helpful to kind of build off of what Levi was just saying. How do you actually get this stuff deployed? Go from that innovation to the practical realities of day-to-day production.
Yeah, great question. I think one of the things that Levi mentioned earlier, the cross-functional collaborative effort is really important. It's kind of looking at, okay, we've got this successful proof of concept, and I've worked with, we have a really strong technical VR guy in our production engineering group, and he just was getting so frustrated because he's like, we've shown people this, it should work, why can't we get farther? We had a little bit of luck with, with pressure on budgets and getting cut. So we had an opportunity that arose, and at that opportunity, I worked with him, and I kind of looked at over this whole process, who needs to be the stakeholders, who needs to be involved in this, how does this process touch every person? And we kind of developed a cross-functional team and got a lot of teamwork from people who were not responsible for the actual success of this, but volunteer their efforts into it. And we went from like a single success to a bigger 2 or 3 day event success. And that led us into being able to show both the advantages of doing it and also the difficulties, and really see where we needed to go to standardize it. And so we've had, really, I think the key point there is just the team and getting everyone involved. And we've gotten support from grassroots and from executive management. And from there, then it's just asking for the head count and the manpower to actually make it work. And so there's still a lot of story you have to tell, and an ROI you have to show. But really getting it, from the ground up and from the top down, and everyone involved it's a big challenge, but I feel like that's what you got to do.
Great. And by the way, panel, anybody's got anything to add to what everybody says, please feel free to pipe in. And I'm going to prompt Megan on this one, though, because you've done some pretty remarkable being a creative, ways of exposing a very large company to just the coolness, but also the practical realities of VR. Maybe you could just speak to that briefly.
Sure, I'd love to. So one thing that I instituted at Gensler was something called a VR Jam. And what that was a standing weekly meeting. We would take a different design team. I reached out to design teams that had just won awards for their buildings, because I thought, okay, they'll be excited to talk about it. And they'd be projects that other people in the firm would really want to see. So I would take their model, I would put it into virtual reality, distribute it across all of our 50 offices, crash the network on 3 separate occasions, even if I was doing this at 4 in the morning, because building files are just massive. They're huge. So it takes a lot of effort to get them into virtual reality. And then we would have this meeting, it would be about an hour, and the design team would do a walkthrough, and anyone could call in, and they could either watch from their screens like a GoToMeeting, or they could wear a virtual reality headset and join together in a multiplayer mode in the model. And so this was it was amazing. We had hundreds of people participating, and it had just started as one office in Newport Beach and my office in Los Angeles just saying, oh, there's this feature where we can meet together in a model, we should try it. But it turned into this huge effort. And then the other thing I did, once we started getting people coming to it, I was like, oh, we need to publicize this somehow. So I started doing a newsletter, and I said, okay, let's just send it to the whole Los Angeles office, which is about 600 people, and let's see what happens. Well, the CEO sits in Los Angeles, so he saw it, and he said, why aren't you sending this to the entire firm? So we started sending it to the whole firm, and we did this every week. So it would feature a project where a team had used virtual reality, because one of the most important things if you're trying to get your organization to change the way they're working, especially if they're an organization where people already feel really successful in what they're doing, they don't see a point in a new technology, is you need to kind of have social proof. So that was one way that we were achieving it, by celebrating these successes of others using it.
Frank, I've kind of got a fun one. The one of the ways that we got it out there is we're a huge United Way supporter at Bridgestone. And so we have a week a year where we do a big campaign. We try to raise money through various things, bake sales and things like that. And so 2 years ago, we did a VR scavenger hunt. And so we took one of our machines, one of our very large tire machines, takes about 20,000 square feet, and we hid little logos or whatever all over the machine, and they had to find as many as they could in 60 seconds. And so we had, the VPs in there, we had engineers in there that were maybe afraid to use it in their design reviews, but they were playing this game, they were having fun. But it was a real machine that we were doing a design review on. So they were looking under the machine, they were down on their hands and knees, crawling around in the Vive, trying to find these little United Way logos all over the machine. And I think that was something we didn't even intend to drive adoption with, but that did more good for us than any of the PR campaigns and things that we did across the company. Was just let them get in there and have fun, so they weren't afraid to use it. They weren't scared to be the first one to look goofy crawling around on the floor, because it was a competition. It was fun, and it was for a good cause. So
yeah, and I love that example too, because we've started seeing that from our HR recruiting initiatives, so our campus recruiting and college recruiting initiatives there. We got STEM groups on the innovation side and the engineering side taking VR and AR into schools. And it's almost gamifying in some ways and showing some of our products in other ways. We use it for fundraising as well. So each time we do something, every year now we have something called Beltoberfest. So in October, we'll kind of open up a beer garden network after hours. We'll bring in VR, we'll bring in AR. People just kind of get together and network and have a little bit of fun. And they also get to see the latest products we've done on the marketing side or the engineering side as well. So I think those are excellent ways to kind of get it out, because then people are coming up going, oh, I didn't know we had this, or I didn't know we do that, and who's in charge of this? And then my inbox fills up, and it's hard to kind of get caught up. But and something else we were kind of just kind of riffing about before we got up here. So many times, I mean, even whether we manage big teams or small teams or being a team of one, when you get into this XR and, like we were saying earlier, you really have to kind of push a lot. I believe Drew was saying that. It's true, and you really do feel kind of a team of one, because I manage a few different teams, but none of them really do AR, VR in-house. So we spend a lot of our time doing proof of concept and proof points to the right decision makers to say, no, you need to start baking some of this stuff into your budget. We're going to get left behind. These are some best practices. This is a real industry, and these are real opportunities. But a lot of times you kind of feel like the lonely voice shouting in a really, really big room. But it takes those types of engagements, I think, to start to drive that message home.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue to you, Drew. You've been doing this for quite a while, and from a Gulfstream perspective, you're building really big things that can't fall down, right? They got to fly, and they're mission critical, and every part is has its challenges in manufacturing and its stakeholders that have the way they've been doing it for decades, and for very good reasons, right? For very good reasons. So just coming in with like a new idea on how to do something doesn't necessarily fly. So maybe you can kind of explain a little bit on some of the innovation you've done and gaining stakeholder adoption and some of the technology barriers that you've had to kind of break down in order to gain that adoption.
Yeah, so in our group, we have been doing it for a couple years now. We've had a cave since 2011, and we've been looking at the headsets and AR and VR since about 2015. So it doesn't seem like a long time, but in then space, it's kind of old. And we've hit a lot of barriers, that's for sure. And we've had a lot of stakeholder engagement. And how we did it was, this is not a technology that you can put up in a PowerPoint and show to people or send out. I know the newsletter is great, but really getting people to actually do it and get their hands on it is about the only way that you really generate a lot of the excitement. So over the past couple of years, we've done probably one or more a month where we have groups come in and we do a tech demo for them. We show them multiple headsets, we show them our cave, we show them augmented reality glasses, and it's to where most everybody in the company at least knows who we are and what we do. And so we'll get people coming to us with different ideas and things like that. And we get a lot of POCs. Then it hits the hard side. So you can gather a lot of ROI up front, but being able to set the expectation of this is a new technology. Now I have to go through IT to get it implemented, to go into production, and before I even scale it up, you have to set the expectation that this might take a year or more because I'm going to have to integrate it into my systems that have been around a while. And in the aerospace industry, we have to contend with the little agency called the FAA with a lot of our systems. And when we're working in manufacturing, they're tied to these systems that have been vetted and certified by the FAA. So if I want to do work instructions, I have to make sure that whatever I'm doing is integrated into that system that's already in place. So if I want to use the HoloLens or the Magic Leap or glass, I have to make sure whatever system I'm using to generate the work instructions is tied in on the back end side as well. Or I'm just having to recreate work instructions again, which is rather pointless. So that's the downside and the hurdle side of this technology. It's great, and we show it to a lot of people, and we do a lot of quick turn projects for engineering. But in manufacturing, there's a lot of POCs out there, but like I said, it's trying to get it integrated into the existing legacy systems because you have to integrate or upgrade your whole infrastructure to keep up with it.
Yeah, and Andy, I wanted to give you a quick shout here. You went through some ROI examples, and at Bridgestone, I met you. I think I don't know, it was 2 or 3 years ago at Autodesk University. I was blown away. You had a whole conveyor belt and like massive massive product on display that was augmented by some VR work that you were doing. And you were mentioning that, VR has really become like all of your engineers are now wanting, they got to see a design review before they want to go any further. Whereas breaking that barrier was kind of like, why do I want to look at this? I'm not going to put this on my face. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the kind of the ROI aspect and how you've kind of cracked the nut on going from a, why do I want to use this to I got to have it, and when can I get into your lab to check out my review?
Yeah, so, we've heard a lot about ROI this week, and everybody understands that they throw out these huge numbers of money that you can save. And one of the things I always caution is if you go into your boss's office and you tell him you can save him $50 million, even if you're right, he's not going to believe you. So what we do is we give, I call it an ROI funnel. So we say, if we took, all the capital projects, we took this percentage and we break it down, and we think that we could save, as much as $50 million over 5 years, what's the worst case scenario with that? Okay, the worst case scenario, you take all those percentages, you break it down, you go, we may only save $5 million. I don't think anybody in this room would turn down $5 million. And so it's a little bit more believable to management that we can show this kind of this funnel of what ifs. So just like you see like a hurricane track coming, you can say, this is the potential of the ROI if we do this at a certain time. And I think that's key that management wants to see, how fast can we get it? How much am I really going to save? And then what happens if you don't save that? And so the cost is so low on a HTC Vive or even a HoloLens or something like that if you can just get something little implemented in there and then you can extrapolate that out, it's important. And then go super conservative. I'd much rather tell my boss I'm going to save him $10,000 and accidentally save him $100,000 than to go the other way around and have to explain where that $90,000 went that I promised.
Yeah, and towards that, and I want to kind of open it up to the panel because this is kind of a pet peeve for me. My background is more on the content side of things, and even though I work at HTC and I'm a hardware guy right now, at the end of the day, we're talking about monitors. They're very fancy. It's display. It's kind of the end of the line, but there's so much costs and it's really the graphic pipeline, right? It's how do you go from your PLM, server and all these processes that are in there, the big fat CAD files that somehow or another are going to have to get into a little tiny display device that needs to run at 90 frames a second in a highly optimized, constrained runtime environment. There are massive costs that are associated with that. Right? And it's really hard, and there's lots of stakeholders. So we can talk about devices all day long, and you can see, many, many great devices out there. But content is always king, and there's a lot of costs associated with it. So I'd like to just kind of open up to the panel here and really ask the question, here we are today, how do you see these content pipelines evolving? What are you doing to do it, and where do you see it 3 years from now?
So I was watching everyone's faces as you were asking that question. There were a lot of smirks, which tells me we're not the only ones who've had this issue, right? So, and it's a constant thing. In fact, it's so much that I actually went and found Dassault, their booth at CES, and I found the VP of sales, and I was like, when are you going to get out of the box for CATIA or whatever to be able to just plug in a VR set? And he was like, oh, it's coming, version whatever, 19 or something's coming. And I'm like, yeah, it's all vaporware at this point, right? So it's never going to be plug and play, or at least I don't think anytime very, very soon. We spend a lot of our time actually recreating CAD because it is the content we need. We always use CAD as a reference. And I'm talking from the marketing and the creative content side. But I was saying earlier to Frank before this is like I'm really platform agnostic. I don't care what the tech is. I don't care what the source files are. I just want to make sure we're picking the right ones for the story we're trying to tell. Because again, from the creative marketing side, to try to get the story of these products and the capabilities out there, which is one side of the job, I don't care. Whatever platform is going to do that the best. I don't care if it's VR. I don't care if it's AR. I just want it to be quality. I want it to be very clear, very user-friendly. Someone needs to get in there. If they don't want to put the headset on, you better have something else they can experience, right? A tablet or something else. So my recommendation is, again, always maybe have a couple different forms of ways to show people. I've had people who will not put a VR headset on at a show. Very few. Most people are in for it. I always tell them, like, well, if a 4-star general will stick it on his face and crawl around on under an aircraft, you can do it, right? These guys are very, worried about visibility, and they don't want to look silly in front of their, direct reports. But if they can do it, you can do it. And if people say, well, am I going to get sick if I do this? I'm like, no, we've done over 20,000 people over 3 years in the tech. It's very easily adaptable. But if it's not, we don't want to do it, right? So we're very cognizant of what that audience, visibility and the audience participation and reaction is going to be. So it's really a matter of making sure that your content is king and you're picking your platform and leverage other users. Like, talk to other people, like, what are you using that works? What's not working? What's new? I ask all of the vendors we use, like, show me something I've never seen before. Show me an example of somebody doing something that we want to challenge ourselves to do. Like, keep us on that cutting edge of stuff, and that keeps us trying. And we've I'll get told no 9 times out of 10. I'm just looking for a one maybe that it might be able to show somebody something they've never experienced.
I think it's also important to remember that you don't have to have, a complete Bell helicopter modeled in 3D with full shadows and rendering. It's great that maybe down the road we will have that eventually. But to start out, you can start simple. And if you set that expectation that, hey, we're going to teach you how to do something. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the KFC Colonel Sanders teaching people how to fry chicken. It was like an escape room game. It was kind of odd and kooky, very video game. And I was like, oh, that's so goofy. But at the same time, it's like, I guarantee those kids that were playing that goofy VR game don't forget what steps to do. And that's really what they were trying to do. They were trying to train them to remember to do these 14 steps or 20 steps or whatever. So, to start out with, it's going to be like that. We're not going to have this full-on, your entire catalog magically hit a button and it appears. That's okay. And I think that we have to set that expectation and get people, to understand that. It's okay if it's simple, because even that simple representation is better than pulling out a manual, looking at a 2D picture. So anything we get is much better than that. And so people see these sizzle reels and see the end goal of, photorealistic, full real-time rendering, and they expect that out of the gate. And it's like, do we really need that right this second? Let's train this guy to push these 7 buttons. And then we can work on the rest, as we go along through time and the hardware and software gets better.
If there are any architects in here, plug and play is real, and it's here for us now, so it's a little different. For all of our existing platforms like Revit, Rhino, SketchUp, you can press a button, just get Enscape VR, Fuser VR, Insight VR. There's all these companies that have built plugins to do it, so it's there. Where it's going in a few years, I'm really big on this idea of digital twin. You've probably heard of it, at least for buildings. I see kind of this cloud mirror, this artificial soul of your building that's going to be updated in real time with by facilities and maintenance managers. One thing we've just put in our New York office is a smart floor that's tracking kind of everything that's happening. And so this idea of this convergence of like Internet of Things, augmented reality, virtual reality, the cloud data all in one place. I'm really looking forward to seeing how spaces can respond to us and respond to their users. And also for VR and AR to have a lot easier interaction for design using things like voice technology. So you might be able to stand in an environment and say, show me 5 stairs that are 7 inches tall by 11 inches wide, and then the environment can sort of build itself. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
You got something to say here.
Yeah, I was probably jumping into it a little early, but you were talking the last mile before, and it may look like a mile, but it's probably going to be more like no man's trench in World War I, to be honest, because while a lot of these things I'm looking forward to them, I'm also we're to the point now to where we've done a lot of POCs, we've done a lot of great things, we have a lot of really good content. We're looking at how do we manage this content, how do we push more data that doesn't crash our networks, especially if we're starting to do collaborative sessions, and maybe have to pull on you since you've gotten multiple users in there. And being a manufacturing house, and I'm sure other manufacturers in here can understand, a lot of our infrastructure are decades old in some areas, so getting it up to speed to where all this technology is going and being able to handle all of this information that we're wanting to push through the pipelines, through the networks, through the wireless networks, and things like that. And then being able to manage the information. So there's a lot of cloud services out there, but we don't go to the cloud. It has to be on-prem. So we need it to be on-prem as well as do everything and then manage this data, this content, along with our CAD content as well. So the getting through that last portion, so then we could scale it up and then anybody really can use it, is going to be a big push.
Excellent. Eric, you got anything to add?
I would add this same thing. We're pretty far away from the cloud-based solutions, so a lot of our focus has been maybe it's easier to apply VR to a process because it's maybe taking your CAD data and moving it just one step out and like that. So, I mean, the challenges that Drew mentioned are there. We do a lot of visualization, so I'd really like to see real-time ray tracing. But even without that, we found really good ways to use VR to make decisions in visualization, even with some of the limitations. But it's just continuing to push the technology and get it better and better. Use it, find how it helps, and keep using it and keep improving it. Kaizen.
Excellent. What I want to do is we're running out of time. So I want to make sure we can get a few questions in here. And maybe you can raise your hand if you have a question while the mic's getting to you. We got one up front here. I would just say that, we have no mic?
Just repeat the question into your mic.
Okay. I think it's hard to summarize such a diverse discussion that we've had here. But at the end of the day, what I've seen, and to just build on what everybody's seen, is don't try to reinvent a process. Try to augment it. And I don't mean augmented reality, but just where can you add incremental value, a quantifiable incremental value? Don't reinvent the wheel, but start with baby steps and build from there. And it's amazing how much can get done. And I think the architecture is a really good example. You can do a lot with just grayscale in terms of spatial analysis. You don't need ray tracing, all this kind of stuff that's going on. It's going to take all these magicians to make these things look beautiful. You can get a lot of work done and a lot of value by just doing basic spatial analysis and going from there. So pick that early win. That's something that adds value to your organization, and then build from there and build a stakeholder, buy-in and all that other kind of good stuff. So opening up to questions, gentleman in the front.
What is your take on subcontracting your content creation versus having it in-house, such as training scenarios and things like this?
So yeah, I'll speak briefly to that. Most of what we do, we started by outsourcing. We just make sure that we run whatever vendor we're going to outsource to through the proper checks. Proprietary information exchange agreements, NDAs, master services agreements, run them through IT security checks. As long as they vet out and it's all good, we've had great experience with finding expert creators, content creators, digital creators out there. We've got a couple of products, like I said, out here on the show floor that are great examples of that, because I personally find it extremely challenging that you could build up a team of experts in-house really quickly. We talked a little bit about, getting that headcount is nearly impossible. We feel like we're, like I said, shouting into a void to say, this is super important. We need to be doing this. We're going to get left behind. The only way I was able to kind of leapfrog that conversation was by getting sort of a test done out of house and bringing it in and showing that this is possible and it is affordable. We just have to plan for it.
I would also add making sure you have the budget to outsource.
Well, and tell people that build it into their budget for next year. Show them this year, before October, whenever you put in your budgets, and say, this type of thing costs, these ranges. If you see value, add it into your budget for next year and then get to that.
What are you primarily doing back end?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Can you say that again?
What are you guys generally doing on the back end to create that content? Like you're saying, outsourcing, or certain products that you're focusing on when you do that?
What products are you using on the back
So mine's
end?
more on the process. We're looking at a process. We're training. We're doing a design review, whatever it may be. My difference is we'll contract out kind of the app or getting the tool created, and then our contractors, we do use a lot of contractor help for things like this. We bring it in house. We physically have them sit there, and we have them sit there beside us or whatever, so we can do that. But it's along, whatever the experience is. If it's a design review, it's a risk assessment or something like that. Is that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in some of the companies that you're using for the actual content. Like if we were going to do it in-house, where should we be looking?
We start out with laser scans. So we have machinery that's 100 years old. We'll go laser scan it. Sometimes we simplify it by redrawing it from scratch. Sometimes we decimate the point clouds down and we create a mesh model out of it. You can put mesh models in the VR. It looks like you took and made it out of crayons and took a blowtorch to it, so it's not beautiful. But it does work, especially if you're going to be adding to it. So we'll do that. We're an Autodesk house, so we use Revit for our buildings and Inventor for our 3D models across the board.
And I think a lot of the pieces we see, at least on the aircraft side, so we'll have an innovation engineering team in-house that will come up with a very functional aircraft design, even as a concept. But we'll get pushback of like, yes, it's functional, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't meet that form factor of being aesthetically pleasing. So then that's where we'll take it, sort of stand up a team, a combination of in-house direction and out-of-house content creation to say, okay, cool, let's make it not just look better aesthetically inside and out, but also think around the experience to kind of take it out and publicize, this is kind of where we're going. And I find that it's often, there's an advantage to bringing in, an outside opinion because they see things that, we're just too close to sometimes.
Yeah, I would just say, I'll get to this question in just a second. What I've seen a lot of companies do with us is we have a lot of developers that we work with, Sector 5 being one of them, and a number of others that are just absolutely outstanding at what they do. And what I recommend to my customers is, hey, go to an outside company, bring them in, learn from it, develop your own internal expertise, because you're going to need this as a core competency in your business going forward. I mean, XR is here to stay. I think we can clearly state that. It used to be kind of like, in the trough of disillusionment, it's all going to vaporize like it's done several times over the last several decades. I don't see that. I don't think anybody in this room sees that. So it's here to stay. It's going to be a core competency of your business. But again, crawl, walk, run. Work with some great companies outside. Bring that talent in, develop your own talent, and as you scale, you're going to continue to use those outside companies to scale with you. It's going to be hard to get that, like you say, internal headcount. So we've got about a minute and a half. I want to get this gentleman's question over here.
Right. Over the past years, it has generally been the perception that AR has got more applicability to the industrial manufacturing space, and VR kind of is hampered by the video gamer geek vibe. But based on the comments of this panel, it just seems to me that VR may be finally kind of getting to be on par with AR, at least in certain areas. I just want to get your comments on that.
I would say Toyota, we're using a lot of VR. And I don't know if it's because I'm not exactly sure why, but I see a lot of the applications in the AR applications that are talked about here that we're not going down that path as much as the VR. It could be because of the cloud stuff and security still, but we're using a lot of VR.
Anybody else want to take it?
Yeah, we use a lot of VR, especially up front in the engineering side of things and training. We also have some AR use cases in that field that we didn't think would happen, but it's about even across the board for us.
Yeah, I think you get down to that content, that graphic pipeline. Worked with a lot of great engineers, and it really, you got to find a platform provider or the tools and tech to get that 10, 20 gigabyte CAD file and a little megabyte runtime on a little teeny device. Okay, there's a lot of stuff in between there, and it's getting worked out. The pipelines are getting developed. There's a lot of great vendors here that are doing it. Honestly, props to a company like Theorem, for example, hardcore, old school CAD company, been doing this for decades. They've got a VR and XR pipeline now, which is absolutely cool. To me, that's bellwether. That's like, okay, the pros are here. They're getting it done. This is a real business. It's a real industry, and we can all benefit from it. So, crawl, walk, run, pick that near-term, easy lift, add value to existing processes, build your stakeholders, make sure you got executive buy-in. You know, it's really important that you get that buy-in. So we call it internally at HTC, we call it air cover. Make sure you got that air cover. And, you know, have a lot of fun doing this, because this is an exciting industry. And I just want to thank everybody for being here today. Thank our panel. Thank you very much. We'll be in the back if you guys have any questions. Happy to stick around.